Okay, so to give you a sense of the structure of this this campfire, I'm going to start with a quick 10-minute exercise. Then I'm going to start into a presentation, which I'm expecting to take between about 45 minutes to an hour, and hopefully we will have some time for questions at the end of that. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Thank you for the introduction, Thomas. So my journey into the world of design began with my doctoral research on the writing of the famed Israeli general Shimon Peres. That research took me on a journey to meet Philippe Bülow-Brassard, who many of you know, I expect, at CFC a few years back, who introduced me to Ofer Gracher, who then introduced me to Philippe Dufour, who introduced me to Ofer Gracher, who self-describes as the last of the Mohicans of the Israeli School of Systemic Operational Design. Over the last 2 years, Ofra, Philippe Dufour, and myself have been laboring to deliver an article on the current state of design in the IDF, which is out now in open access in the latest edition of the Sheiji Journal of Design, Economics, and Innovation. That is actually my first academic publication, and I could not be prouder of that piece of work. And the ideas developed in that article inform today's campfire. So I'm going to start with a quick exercise. I'm going to show you 4 seemingly unconnected events that happened in the last 2 years. You don't need to write them down or anything like that because these will come up again in a minute. So the first one here from Monday, in fact, OpenAI's ChatGPT, which Thomas knows a lot about, passes Wharton's MBA exam while also qualifying for a medical license in the United States. From the September 22nd, 2022 Guardian, Catholics outnumber Protestants in Northern Ireland for the first time. Demographic shift shown in census was expected, but will still deliver psychological blow to unionists. From the February 5th, Global News, 2022, trucker convoy, Ottawa under siege amid nationwide insurrection, officials say. And from the November 30th, 2021, PBS News, Barbados becomes a republic after bidding farewell to the British monarchy. So, I want you to take a piece of paper or a notepad, or just open a Word doc, and I want you to see if you can compose or even draw a short narrative that connects these seemingly unrelated events. You don't need to connect them all, but let's see if you can pull 3 together. Okay, I think that's enough time. So who wants to volunteer to go first? And Michael, I'd ask you to moderate that if somebody wants to give it a shot.
I don't mind, buddy.
Sure, let's hear it, Matthew.
All right. I didn't go all the way into writing 15 pages there, but so here goes. At 12, Stella had already figured out that societal and technological changes have a knack of making new victims without new victors. True to Virgilio's speed, which her father Matt crammed in her nighttime routine as if it was Cinderella's story, she knew why her anxious new world was so threatening to her and to those she loved. And all of it depended on your point of view. I got stuck there. So, continuing, I would go and try to exploit some of the main threads of why those stories are scary, but using conceptual concepts such as the emotional, right? Fear, without going into the details. So that's where I am. I don't know if that's any good, but that's my brain right now.
No, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that you took a literary tack to it, which is not what I did myself. Thank you, Matthew. Anybody else want to take a shot?
I'm happy to if no one else steps up.
Sure. Oh, hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning from Australia, where it is 8:47 on Australia Day, which is our national equivalent to America's 4th of July holiday. Okay. So, yeah, cheers, everybody, with my water. I'm a big drinker here. And I went for a chaos theory explanation. So I think all of this was actually caused by a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil. And that led to massive ripples all around the weather systems all around the world, which changed a number of things. So in Ireland, that made the weather get colder, which meant that the Catholics spent more time in bed. Now, you can put two and two together and figure out where that led, but suffice to say, the population of Catholics grew faster than the population of Protestants in Ireland as a result of the weather change. In Barbados, the weather became hotter, and the heat drove Republicans crazy and led them to do something silly. By the way, I'm a monarchist, and we have the same debate here in Australia. Can you tell? Sorry, Americans. You made your choice. You can live with that. It did get cooler in California as a result of the butterfly flapping its wings, speaking of the weather. And as a result, the AI's servers got cooler. They didn't heat up so much, and the AI was able to better and more clearly study for its tests, which enabled it to subsequently pass them and ace them, which was excellent. And finally, for some unknown reason to me, the weather effect didn't actually change anything in Ottawa, which meant that the truckers could go ahead with their plan to put the nation under siege with no problems.
Beautiful. I love chaos theory as the overarching model to connect the events. Does anybody else want to take a stab? Yeah, it was great. I can offer mine if nobody else wants to take the bait. So as you know, somebody who's deeply indebted to the Nietzschean Foucauldian tradition, I went with the philosophical meta-narrative, and it was simply this: knowledge is in crisis, legitimation of authority with it. What is the legitimate source of authority when the sources of knowledge, power, a intertwined relationship, are in question? So what I wanted to demonstrate with this is that in a world of seeming chaos and randomness, the stories we tell about what is happening are crucial mediums for getting our bearing. And that is the idea that I want to explore in today's campfire. And because it is a snow day in Hamilton, I'm going to wheel out the YouTube VCR to develop a case study for strategic design by retelling a story taken from the celebrated HBO series The Wire, which is a bit of a shared obsession in the AOD office. My thanks to my friend and colleague, Thomas Changar-Thill, who had the idea for hosting a campfire on The Wire himself, and who idea I've clearly stolen. But I'm hoping to do Thomas's love for The Wire justice. This is another way of saying that I'm not going to try to capture everything our article is about in this campfire, although I encourage you to explore the reading list if you're interested in the legacy of the Israeli experiment. Nor am I going to recount the rich and fascinating history of systemic operational design. Instead, I'm going to use this campfire to tell a story that illustrates some of the key principles of strategic design. And my hope is that story might inspire you to mobilize those principles in your own practice as either defense professionals or as aspiring designers. But for the sake of getting everyone on board with those principles, these are the key ideas that I'm illustrating here. The first facet of this concerns perception, the idea that reality is something that a strategist actively constructs to make meaning of the world. By constructing reality on their own terms, the strategist develops an actionable picture of the world that they hope to transform to advantage. The next conception or concept: storytelling is an indispensable practice for making and communicating meaning, and for realizing values in a chaotic world that threatens those values. Making meaning of troublesome and even threatening events is a necessary act of conceptualization of strategy. And finally, action. Strategic design is an act of storytelling that elects to realize a different story than the one we tell ourselves about the reality we live in. As such, strategic design is an act of self-disruption. Telling a different story about the reality we know is tantamount to choosing a different path to follow and seeing where it leads. And transforming the world by blazing a different path is the essence of strategic design. So at this point, if you're stumped, you don't need to think too hard on these principles, because I'm going to try to illustrate what these principles look like in practice. But the key idea that I do want you to hold in mind is that good strategy is often simply about telling a good story and working to make that story reality. So, The Wire ran for 5 seasons, from 2002 to 2008. An early example of so-called prestige television, the series is often celebrated by critics and academics like myself as the best TV show of all time. It was written and produced by David Simon, a former journalist with the Baltimore Sun, who embedded with detectives from the homicide unit of the Baltimore PD. Simon used that experience to write the nonfiction novel Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, which won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best True Crime Book in 1992. Leaning on an ensemble cast of mostly local actors, filming exclusively in Baltimore and around the DC Beltway, the show develops a rich sociology of urban decay in the city of Baltimore, Maryland, one of the oldest and most dangerous cities in America. While The Wire is at heart a police procedural, it engages realistic, empathetic, heartbreaking, and occasionally ruthless storytelling to explore systemic relations between gangs, the police, the schools, the prisons, the press, the ports, the unions, the churches, the developers, state and federal government, and City Hall. It is a show that is deeply interested in the machinations and failures of the system, the possibilities and cruelties of the American dream, the stories and experiences of the other, particularly Black Americans, in all their valences of significance and potential. It is also a show about the practice of strategy in an institution that seems to actively deter innovation and incentivize conformity to existing political and cultural narratives. While the Baltimore PD is not a defense organization, it has many of the trappings of a martial culture, and the series leans in on those traditions to color the world of its officers and detectives. The show also takes place during the early years of the global war on terror, and references to those wars are a common trope in the series. The drug trade in West Baltimore is often framed as a war in its own right, a kind of endless, labyrinthine, low-intensity conflict corroding the already damaged social and institutional bonds of the city, with no exit or resolution in sight. So while The Wire isn't set in a defense context, strategy and operations are an important institutional facet of meaning-making in the world of The Wire, and that's the aspect I'm going to focus on in this campfire. In the first season, the disruptive strategy that the detectives develop is to simply practice a new form of investigation, a special operation spearheaded by the newly formed Major Crimes Unit, an ad hoc detail of ambitious misfits and pathological screw-ups, taking the form of a sophisticated wiretap to develop an evolving, actionable picture of the drug distribution system in the projects of West Baltimore. Deliberately breaking with the failed policing strategy embodying the tactic of random rip-and-run drug busts and ad hoc murder investigations, the wiretap investigation succeeds at the operational level, resulting in the arrest and prosecution of several key players in the Barksdale crime organization. But of course, the drug trade in Baltimore is a complex social system, as is the Baltimore PD, and the consequences of that operation continues to have ripple effects down the line. As the Stoic philosopher Heraclitus says, one never crosses the same river twice. The drug trade evolves, as does police strategy with it. So the case study I'm going to tease out today plays out in The Wire's third season and implicitly suggests a compelling example of key aspects of the practice of strategic design. To be sure, this case study is a work of fiction, but as a work of fiction about a real-world setting, the Baltimore PD in the context of the failing war on drugs, it contests the meaning-making structures or stories underpinning real-world policing strategies. As such, it is a compelling study of reflexive strategy as a meaning-making practice. The policing strategy I'm teasing out here works to define reality on its own terms in order to transform the world to the advantage of the institution and the citizens it serves. And the argument that I'm making is that Major Howard Bunny Colvins, radical approach to drug enforcement is an instructive model of an innovative and disruptive strategy that takes substantial risks in order to change the game being played. Recognizing the failures of the so-called war on drugs, Major Colvin simply elects to tell a different story than the story that the institution he serves incentivizes, and upon which its legitimacy as a law enforcement agency seems to depend. Leveraging that story into a testable concept for effective action, Major Colvin realizes contentious strategy through a limited and provisional operation that aims to reshape the environment in which policing plays out in West Baltimore. That strategy, which disrupts the status quo of the organization he serves as district commander, aims to enhance the organization's positioning to deliver on its mandate to serve and protect citizens of the city. So let me introduce the scenario. Major Bunny Colvin, who in A Stroke of Serendipity is played by an actor named Robert Wisdom, is commander of the Western District of the Baltimore Police Department. He is 6 months from retirement and a major's pension. He values policing as a civil institution, implicitly subscribing to Sir Robert Peel's ethical principles of policing by community consent. But he is under intense pressure from the organization to deliver policing stats that support a political narrative about reducing the soaring murder rates in the city. That pressure creates a tension between his duty as a police commander to protect the citizens of Baltimore and the demands of the organization to protect its own interests. So let's see if this works.
The word from on high is that felony rates, district by district, will decline by 5% before the end of the year.
We are dealing in certainties. You will reduce the UCR felonies by 5% or more, and I've always wanted to say this. Let no man come back alive.
In addition, we will hold this year's murders to 275 or less.
Christ.
Feeling a little phased, Colonel Foster? A little dyspeptic?
No, sir. I'm good to go.
Here's a fun fact for you people. If Baltimore had New York's population, we'd be clocking 4,000 murders a year at this rate. There is no excuse I will accept. I don't care how you do it. Just fucking do it.
Deputy, as familiar as we all are with the urban crime environment, I think we all understand there are certain processes by which you can reduce the number of overall felonies. You can reclassify an ag assault, or you can impound a robbery. But how do you make a body disappear?
There isn't one of you in this room who isn't here by appointment. If you want to continue wearing those oak clusters, you will shut up and step up. Any of you who can't bring in the numbers we need will be replaced by someone who can.
That is all.
Jesus, Barney. What got into you? I was 6 months to my 30. I'm out there doing a major's pension. The hell they could do to me.
So Major Colvin, in this scene, Major Colvin names a tension that the officers in concept all recognize, but none will point out, because naming it threatens the authority of the institution's leadership. The commanders in the room have been implicitly instructed by Deputy Commissioner Rawls to manipulate their data by juking the stats. Juking the stats in the water to the wire refers to a common practice by which the district commanders manipulate police reports to suit a political narrative about the prevalence of crime in the city. But that common practice makes the work of devising a viable policing strategy nearly impossible. Juking the stats is essentially about servicing an externally imposed narrative. Worse still, the practice cannot deliver the outcome which is demanded by the commissioners because it cannot make a murder disappear. A body is a body, and there's no counter narrative that can massage that cold, hard fact, that essential reality. The Baltimore PD not only lacks the means of addressing the friction pushing back from the environment, but is willfully obscuring its reality to suit a political narrative that is not of their own making. Major Colvin is subtly naming this tension by pushing the buttons of his superior. And he is also taking the directive to produce an outcome by dropping the murder rate as a license to devise his own narrative in pursuit of a viable policing strategy in the Western District. He begins simply by refusing to juke the stats, giving clean statistics in order to provide a clear picture of the threat environment he aims to transform as the violence in West Baltimore continues to escalate.
Be seated. Regarding Officer Dozeman, his condition has been upgraded to guarded until he can receive visits, and he's been moved to a recovery unit. As of this tour, all hand-to-hand undercover buys of CDS are suspended in the Western District. Somewheres back in the dawn of time, this district had itself a civic dilemma, epic proportion. The city council had just passed a law that forbid alcoholic consumption in public places, on the streets and on the corners. But the corner is, and it was, and it always will be, the poor man's lounge. It's where a man wants to be on a hot summer's night. It's cheaper than a bar, catch a nice breeze, you watch the girls go by. But the law is the law. The Western cops rolling by, what were they gonna do? They arrested every dude out there for tipping back a high life. There'd be no other time for any other kind of police work. And if they looked the other way, they'd open themselves to all kinds of flaunting, all kinds of disrespect. Now, this is before my time when it happened, but somewhere back in 50s and 60s, there was a small moment of goddamn genius by some nameless smokehound who comes out to cut rate one day, and on his way to the corner, he slips that just bought pint of elderberry into a paper bag. A great moment of civic compromise. That small, wrinkle-ass paper bag allowed the corner boys to have their drink in peace, and it gave us permission to go and do police work. The kind of police work that's actually worth the effort. That's worth actually taking a bullet for. Dozeman, you got shot last night trying to buy 3 vials. 3. There's never been a paper bag for drugs. Until now.
So, CDS officer Dozeman is shot in an undercover buy for a small quantity of drugs. He survives. Reading this environmental friction and recognizing the futility of doubling down on a failed strategy, consistent with the logic of the war on drugs, Major Colvin suspends CDS hand-to-hand buys and devises another approach. He tells a story to communicate the logic of the developing strategy and deploys a visual metaphor to aid in its conceptualization for the officers under his command. The gist of his story is that the street corners, the spaces which are violently contested by the competing gangs of West Baltimore, and likewise by the police who are attempting to stop them, are a vital feature of social life in the city. Citizens have an implicit right to their enjoyment, which the drug trade has compromised. Moreover, the heavy-handed tactics police default to in dealing with the problem have damaged the civic institution of policing in the process by compromising the foundations upon which Colvin's ideal model of policing is founded, i.e. Peel's principles. By telling this story, Major Colvin is beginning to make a case for a new strategy, the visual metaphor for which is, quote-unquote, a paper bag for drugs. And I will let Major Colvin explain what his strategy looks like as an operation on the ground.
It's the good part. It's what I call a carrot. Now, you move your people into any designated area I told you about, and you'll have immunity from arrest and prosecution. You're free to make your drops, collect what need collecting. Won't nobody bother you. You got my word on it.
What do you get out of this?
That's a fair question. I want to salvage what's still worth salvaging in my district. And I can't do that with a bunch of young hoppers running around scaring the hell out of decent people. Now, these kids ain't gonna listen to me, but they will listen to y'all. Now, you tell them to move down here, set up a shop, and they will. It's the way I got it figured. I motivate you, and you motivate them.
No, it's the trap.
No, you check out the spot. There ain't no cameras, ain't no microphones, nothing. Any cops you see gonna be down right on the perimeter, just to make sure there's no violence. And you watch. You see if it don't work out the way I say.
Nothing personal against you, Chief, but what happens if we buck?
Remember the carrot, right? Well, you choose to stick instead. You're gonna feel that stick like you ain't never felt before. We're gonna indict every corner, every day. I got over 200 sworn personnel, and I plan to free up every one of them to knock every one of y'all down they can. You on the corner in my district? It ain't gonna be about no humble, ain't gonna be about no loitering charge, nothing like that. There's gonna be some biblical shit happening to you on the way to that motherfucking jail wagon. You understand me? And while you bucking the new system, the smart ones among you gonna be down here, making money, hand over fist. So think it over. I swear to God, come Monday, your world of mine ain't gonna be the same. It's a good part.
Okay. So Colvin's strategy is clearly quite high risk, and it poses some serious challenges. There is considerable operational friction in the earliest phases. A church deacon who witnesses the early days of the Amsterdam experiment describes what he sees as hell on earth. Without any medical supports or social workers present, the so-called free zones quickly become dens of iniquity. Colvin massages this friction by involving stakeholders in the churches and the universities to develop their own outreach programs in the free zones. Expanding the scope of the operation in this way is relatively successful, and the health outcomes of the addicts who flock to these neighborhoods begins to improve. The harder sell is to his own officers, who must buy in for the strategy to be successful. Some of the more hardened soldiers of the war on drugs are less than receptive to the strategy, quite understandably, and it remains a significant point of tension between Major Colvin and the officers under his command. This show makes clear that this is not a tension that Colvin's leadership can easily resolve. But Major Colvin understands that these are the stakes of the strategy. The strategy involves deliberate trade-offs that carry significant risks in an institution that depends on a high degree of confidence in authority to function.
I want to thank you for the loyalty you showed, moving that body. It wasn't the most sensible thing, but I appreciate it nonetheless. You're a good man, Sergeant. You got good instincts. And as far as I can tell, you're a decent supervisor. But from where I sit, you ain't shit when it comes to policing. Don't take it personal. It ain't just you. It's all our young police. Whole generation, y'all. Now, you think about it. You've been here over a year now, Carver. You got nobody looking out for you. Nobody willing to talk to you. That about sum it up? And that's the problem. And I didn't think there was any way I was ever going to get my head around it. But then Dozeman gets shot for some bullshit. And that's when I about reached my limit. And that's when the idea of the free zone of Amsterdam come to me, because this drug thing, this ain't police work. No, it ain't. I mean, I can send any fool with a badge and a gun up on them corners and jack a crew and grab vials. But policing, I mean, you call summer war. And pretty soon, everybody gonna be running around acting like warriors. They gonna be running around on a damn crusade, storming corners, slapping on cuffs, racking up body counts. And when you at war, you need a fucking enemy. And pretty soon, damn near everybody on every corner is your fucking enemy. And soon the neighborhood that you're supposed to be policing, that's just occupied territory. You follow this?
I think so.
Look at the point I'm making, Carver, is this. Soldiering and policing, they ain't the same thing. And before we went and took the wrong turn and started up with these war games, the cop walked a beat, and he learned that post. And if there were things that happened up on that post, whether they be a rape, a robbery, or shooting, he had people out there helping them, feeding them information.
Okay, so Major Colvin is appealing to a different model of the legitimacy of policing than the model that informs the failed strategies of the war on drugs. He simply envisions a different reality than the narrative that the organization deploys to protect its political interests. And his strategy attempts to realize that reality so that the organization better serves the citizens of Baltimore. Motivated by a deep reverence for policing as an institution and the values it embodies, Colvin devises a limited, provisional approach that attempts to manifest those values in the world he is responsible for as a commanding officer of the Baltimore Western District, and in which he can make a difference. And Major Colvin's drug enforcement strategy makes a difference. But this is Baltimore, and with the cosmology of The Wire, the gods will not save you. The press gets wind of Colvin's strategy in the Western District, and the other shoe drops. Major Colvin must make an accounting of his strategy to Comstat.
Norton Pulaski. The photo was taken at 4 p.m., prime time for street-level dealing. That is Riggs and Calhoun, Mountain Fayette, Emerson and Bryce. It's your footpost, Deputy.
I know where it is, Major. What I don't know and very much want to know is where is the West Baltimore drug trade?
I hope, Major, these are not staged photographs you're showing us.
No, sir. They're not. No, Deputy. I found another approach.
I'm all ears, Bunny.
I moved them off the corners.
God damn it. Don't be coy with me, Major. I can see that. What I want to know is how the fuck you managed to move them and where the fuck they are now.
Deputy, I don't know quite how to put this, but I began by identifying those areas in my district where drug trafficking was least harmful and proceeded to push all street-level dealing towards those areas. Now, at first, dealing with the juveniles on them corners, I had a little success. But ultimately, by rounding up all the mid-level dealers in my district and making them offer they couldn't refuse, I was able to...
You made them an offer?
Yes, sir. Either they move their people to one of 3 designated areas where drug enforcement was not a district priority, or they face the wrath of every able-bodied soul in my district.
Major, I don't understand. The only time we can hold a drug corner is when we assign officers to stand there. Your slides don't suggest any concerted deployment on any corners. How were you able to
Jesus
effectively...
Christ, you nit. Don't you see what he's done? He's legalized drugs.
Actually, I elected to ignore them.
You lost your fucking mind. He's lost his fucking mind.
You, in my office, now.
That's it, gentlemen. Bunny, you cocksucker, I gotta give it to you. A brilliant idea. Insane and illegal, but stone fucking brilliant nonetheless. After all my putting my foot up people's asses to decrease the numbers, he comes in and in one stroke gets a fucking 14% decrease. Fucking shame it's gonna end our careers, but still.
You all probably
Okay, so the reception of Major Colvin's strategy is tense and ambivalent. The success of the strategy, its delivery of the desired outcome, is noted and even appreciated by Deputy Commissioner Rawls. But Commissioner Burrell recognizes its consequences in a political system in which his and their careers depends on conformity to the established narrative. The war on drugs is an aircraft carrier that can't be turned on a dime, and Major Colvin's pirate Corsair has a pluck and maneuverability that the prior perceives as a threat to the continuity of its own narratives. The experiment is shut down, and tragically, Major Colvin is harshly disciplined for his act of daring hubris. He is forced into early retirement, losing his major's pension in the process. As a work of fiction, The Wire presumes an essential conceit, that the system of capitalism, of which the Baltimore PD is an inextricable systemic component, is beyond reform. And the Baltimore Police Department will continue to grind out bad outcomes in the delivery of its mandate to serve and protect, so long as that performance is incentivized by the system. But that narrative is itself a construction of the show's writers, animated by the narrative principles that can be re-envisioned by its audience to make meaning of the relations of the system it represents. The audience does not have to accept that conceit to appreciate the show, and the stories it tells. There are always choices. Different stories can always be told. And despite the show's essential conceit, the writers seem to relish this possibilities, studying the innovations of misfits and upstarts like Major Colvin to improve the organizations they serve, and which inevitably disappoint those actors' ambitions. So in The Wire, no one gets out clean, but sincere efforts to make a difference always matter, albeit in a limited and professional way. Major Colvin understands something about the reality of the Western District that the organization he serves and the institution he embodies also knows, but cannot admit without also admitting its own duplicity, that it must construct its own reality of events in order to protect its interests. By naming that condition and developing a narrative that develops a different understanding of policing challenges that the organization can't seem to get ahead of, Bunny Colvin takes the initiative to act on his own intuitions. And he makes this leap of faith in order to improve the capacity of the organization he serves to deliver on its mandate. In a world of seemingly intractable problems carried forward by their own inertia, Major Colvin chooses to blaze a new way forward. And in the tragic institutional order of The Wire, this represents an intolerable hubris against the gods, or what amounts to the same thing in this universe, the powers that be. Early in season 3, Commissioner Burrell warns his district commanders, "This is Baltimore, gentlemen. The gods won't save you." But Burrell's preface to that warning is an implicit instruction to liberate oneself from that which seems inevitable or fated. If the gods are screwing you, you find a way to screw them back. Major Colvin is working at a high level of the organization, and as a district commander, he is responsible for mediating between strategy and operations. Not everyone is in that position, and the practice of strategic design might not be suited for everyone. But for those who don't have that kind of power and who want to realize it in their own leadership practice, the simple act of electing to construct a different reality, to tell a different story than the one you think you know and understand, and develop your storytelling ability to solicit buy-in from people you lead and support, can be the first step towards making a difference in the organization you serve. So that is my campfire tale. Thank you for listening, or if you prefer, cool story bro. And I guess we have a bit of time for some question or some discussion here.
Hey, folks are quiet. Thanks, Oliver. I've never seen The Wire, so I enjoyed listening to your presentation, the strategic narrative. You know, I'm debated right now, so I'm having a hard time asking a question because I'm concerned between the ethical perspective and the ethical concept in this, right? From the deontological, I mean, what are the institutions, rules, laws, regulations that dictate the limits of what's acceptable behavior? And where is the line between utilitarianism and how you can actually choose best options for best outcomes, So I don't have any smart questions. That's where I'm debating. But I see it all the time. I do strategy for sales, right? I do it for daily business every day, spend the day on it with a working group in IT. And I am stuck with salespersons. Forgetting their ethics to try to sell subpar solutions to customers. And it drives me nuts, especially when it's veterans selling to defense. It drives me nuts. I want to punch them in the face. So I'm going to think a bit more and ask questions, but you're making me think, and I love that. So thanks, Oliver. It's a great presentation, buddy.
Cool, thank you. I appreciate that. I should be clear. I would very much warn against trying a strategy as bold as Major Colvin's in your own practice. There are no shit. I mean, the Wire makes it clear, like, he's in a lot of trouble. He loses his major's pension. So, buyer beware.
Thanks, of course.
And I think Timothy Day has a question.
I was coming down earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, that was great. I guess sort of jumping off of what Matt just said. I guess is it the rephrasing of the narrative? Like, everyone has playing their character role, and then if all of a sudden you said, okay, but what if we didn't play this role and we play this other role over here? That's probably a bit more of a direct application than breaking laws and things like that. But I love the symbology that the Wire uses here, like using that narrative to paint this picture of like breaking out of just accepted the accepted roles and methods and stuff like that. It was awesome. Thanks.
Cool. I believe Jocelyn has a comment or a question.
Yes. Thank you. That was a great build up and certainly a great example to support your what you are proposing. I think that it reminded me of an element of survivability in an organization where creativity is not necessarily your ally. And that's a great example, because you could say that he demonstrated an extreme creativity because he was able to meet the requirement of the superiors, and they were giving him a whole lot of latitude as to choices he could make. He didn't have a choice. He had to deliver, otherwise he'd be sacked. Therefore, he showed an extreme amount of creativity and got sacked anyway. So it's an interesting conundrum, and particularly given that AOD is really about creativity, and we push that forward as a mean to resolve a lot of issues. We also have to be careful. Anyway, that's what I wanted to offer, and sorry it's not more of a question, but I felt it was important to make as a point.
Yeah, so I think that's a really key point. I had a section in this presentation earlier. I'm not sure how familiar people are with the Journal of Military and Strategic Studies issue, the special issue on design that Philippe Dufour and Philip Bueller-Brassard put together. But one of the ideas that they propose is that design is, in a certain sense, creative or innovative practice in a defense organization is fated in a certain sense by a tragic narrative, whereas by which I mean like the kind of hubris of getting outside of the box opens itself to an enormous risk to basically be punished by the powers that be, that will reap the capital of the benefit and then basically dissolve the innovation potential that they've incentivized. And I mean, like a tragic outcome is certainly not a good one from the perspective of a budding designer or a defense practitioner. So there is, I'm going back to the ancient Greeks here, but there's definitely an implicit warning embedded in this presentation as well. But I mean, that's the nature of risk. I'm not sure if that speaks to that comment or not, but that would be my take.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Constructive feedback?
I guess I have a question or a comment. I guess so. Going back to Bunny, if he had used his storytelling with his superiors instead of his guys, would there have been a different outcome? I guess it's who do you tell your stories to, not just what stories do you tell.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting because Commissioner Rawls, who's the white guy in Comstat, who's got that very kind of brusque attitude, he is probably one of the toughest characters on the show and one of the most disciplinarian in terms of enforcing the imperatives of the institution or the organization. The demand for loyalty. He is, strangely enough, the figure who seems most captivated by the potential of his of Bunny Colvin's strategy. Like he basically celebrates it. If that scene was to continue playing out, Bunny Colvin basically produces a stack of letters from people in the Western District that are celebrating the return of the Corners. They have their streets back. While Commissioner Burrell is basically excoriating Bunny Colvin, the camera shows Deputy Rawls basically reading these letters and smiling. So yes, it's a key point. If he'd worked towards producing more buy-in from his commanders, he might have got a completely different outcome. So thanks for that comment, Tim. It looks like Major Tyler Duncan has a comment or a question.
Yeah, Tyler Duncan. I just can't get rid of Major because of the CSE teams.
Okay.
Just relatively new to design. BB's enlightening us through our course here. So just, I guess, two comments. One was, I don't think this is an example of understanding your environment for creativity, but more of understanding what authorities you actually have. Creativity wasn't the issue. It's he stood out, he stepped outside of what authorities he actually had in the change that he could make, in my opinion. And then the second one was, and he really primed me of that. I think it was Mike, the first gentleman that spoke, was that brought up whether it was ethical or not. Which was interesting to me because it depends on, I guess, the perspective you look at ethics from, which is a bold statement. But is the function of the police to address the safety concerns of the population, or to treat the symptoms of the war on drugs? So the community was a safer space for more people. Vice arresting people selling drugs that were and making the community unsafe. It was just a question of ethics on whether removing the drugs from those areas and putting them somewhere else, while illegal, was it more ethical for the greater community? I don't know.
So that's actually, there's a couple angles. So the question about basically what happens in the show, it's basically an ongoing effort that Colvin has to make sure that this experiment is contained and that it is not ruining the lives of the people who are close to it. Mixed results, I would say, is basically how the show treats that. He can't really control everything that happens in that space, and there are definitely some bad outcomes that happen. To the question of which authority you choose to follow, to me it seems like it's a question of choosing who your master is, which is what Bunny Colvin seems to be doing. And he seems to be basically saying he's choosing between two models of ethics, one of which is the symptom pathology model of the war on drugs, which is, no question, it is a kind of a policing ethic. But I would also say that he is choosing his master in that he is choosing Sir Robert Peel's principles of policing, ethical policing, which is basically it's a series of, it's a point form series of, I think it's 8 principles or 12 principles that were devised in the 19th century as a model of getting the buy-in of the community for policing efforts. So he is, in a certain sense, choosing his master, and he's choosing a very particular kind of ethical model. So that's a great comment. Thank you for that.
Hey, sorry, I've got to go. I've got something else on. Thank you very much. That was really interesting and insightful. I hadn't really paid any attention to The Wire before, and I think your use of it as an example has got me interested in the series. But at the very end, it struck a chord with me when the Major got punished by his organisation for his good ideas. I think a lot of us in the design community have certainly been there. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. And, sorry, camera's on now. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, and I really do appreciate your time in putting this together. It's been insightful.
Appreciate the comment, Aaron. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Bye now. So what do you think, Thomas? Should people watch The Wire?
Absolutely, they should. It's fantastic, and I think you've done it a lot of justice here, Oliver. I might have to watch it again after.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go get a burger at the local bar, and I'm gonna restart the series. So, are there any more questions or comments? If you do, if you want to exchange with me, you're welcome. You're welcome to do that. I'd be happy to talk about it or help you develop your own ideas. Think through the problems that we're talking about. I don't think I posted my email in the presentation, which was an oversight, but you can email me at oliver@aodnetwork.ca. Thanks for listening, everybody. If there's no more questions.
For him to go.
Cool story, bro.
Appreciate the vote of confidence, Tim.